Hello crafty friends, it's Nicole here, and I'm wondering how often you use the same colors and color combinations. If you're feeling stuck and you want a foolproof way to pick fun, exciting, and harmonious color combos, then this sketch starter is for you. For this project, I picked out two sets of backgrounds from my scraps bin, and one set is kind of blues and greens, and the other set is actually greens and pinks. And I picked these two groupings because of the color wheel. This first set is called analogous colors, and those are colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. The second set is called complementary colors, and those are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. I'm going to pair these both with the Peony Bouquet stamp and die set and the Geometric Elements stamp set. I'm starting with the Peony Bouquet stamp and die set, and I'm just going to create some simple gold embossed flowers. I'm starting with the outline pieces, and with the leaves, I just need to pick the ones that have the littlest amount of detail on them. So I pull those two out, and then for the flowers, I'm pulling out the line art for those to start with, and we'll stamp in the second layer with those as well. So getting started here, I've got them all lined up on a piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to add my anti-static powder so I don't get the embossing powder all over the place. And I'll go ahead and ink that up with clear embossing ink. And sometimes you have to stamp it twice just to make sure that you get a good crisp image, but I find that once usually works pretty well as long as your ink pad is nice and juicy. So I've got that all inked up, and I'll go ahead and add my gold embossing powder to that. I like to use my gold embossing powder in a larger container because I am always using it, so I have lots on hand, and it's just easier to do it this way. So now I've got all of my images embossed for the first round here, and I'll go ahead and heat these up. I am going to create a second set so that I can have the flowers for both projects. So once I have both of those done, I went ahead and lined up the second layer for the flowers only. And I'm adding the anti-static all over the piece of cardstock so I don't get any strays on those finished leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up those second layers and get those added into the flowers. This is really going to help them have some extra detail than just the line. And I really think that that helps them to stand out without having to do any other coloring to these elements. So now that I have my embossing powder on those successfully, I'll go ahead and heat them up and then do the same thing again with this second set of images. With my floral elements embossed and die cut, it's time to look at the sentiments. So I've pulled out a strip of white cardstock, and I'm going to use this single piece for both of my sentiments. So I'll just pop my magnet right in the center there. I'm using the Geometric Elements because I love the way that the font looks on the sentiments here. So I'm picking out two that I know will fit on my strip and that will work really great with these cards. And I'll get those lined up and heat embossed, and those will be ready to go for the rest of the project. With all of the components done, it's time to take a look at the sketch. There are 3 squares, a circle, and a strip element. Those background pieces from my stash are what will comprise the background elements of the squares. So I have all of my pieces ready to go, and I've cut down those background pieces to 2" by 2" square. So I'm going to be building right from my card base. I'm using some temporary adhesive to keep it shut so that way I have a nice flat platform to work from. And I'll start by spacing out my squares to meet the spacing on the sketch. And I decided to use the smushed pieces in the background because even though they're really interesting, they're kind of plain compared to that diamond element. So I'm going to go ahead and arrange these up and get them glued down right onto the card base, making sure that I have nice spacing all the way around the edges. With square elements, I want to make especially sure of that because if they do happen to get a little bit off, you're really going to notice that. So I've got my 2 pieces down, and I'm just placing my third, and then the card base actually will be complete. So then I'll be able to move on to arranging the peony elements. I'll go ahead and pull out my focal point peony here and then start arranging some of the background pieces for that. When I'm using a single bloom, I like to use 2 leaves so that way I get a triangular pattern. I get that group of 3, and it really just fills out one side of the flower, just like you would expect to find in a natural arrangement. Now that I've got them glued together, I'm going to add on some foam adhesive, and I always like to put them over the elements where they meet up so that way I can reinforce that glued area. I'll go ahead and remove the backings on those and get them right onto the card base. So this is the circular element, and even though it has the leaves that extend outside of the circle, it really does fit that circular element. So the last thing I'll do is add in the sentiment. Now in the sketch, you'll notice that the strip is kind of aligned in between all of the squares, and that was really just to show that it's a separate element and that the other pieces are indeed squares. You really can shift this piece up or down however you choose, and in this case I chose to pull it down so that way it would cover the top of the bottom square. And I thought it looked really nice the way that it came across and went right over the flower. So to add just a little bit of extra interest, I pulled out the satin gold sequins and I'm arranging them into the card. So you can see there's a lot of groupings of 3 here. The triangular grouping of the squares in the background, the triangular grouping of the flower with the 2 leaves, and now a triangular grouping of the sequins. I always like to pair one of the large sequins with the smallest sequins. I think they look really good together. And then I offset that single medium sequence down towards the bottom into another triangular pattern. So now we'll move on to the second design, and I'm going to go landscape for this. So I've turned my card base and I'm going to add a little bit of a blush in the background. So this is Puffy Heart ink, and I'm using one of the mini ink blenders to get a really nice soft circular glow. It's a little bit offset, but that's intentional because that's where all of the squares are going to match up. Again, I have all of these glorious backgrounds cut down to 2 inches by 2 inches square, and just like the previous card, I'll go ahead and arrange them the way that I think they look best. Again, I'm going for the splattered, smushed ones in the background. The beautiful Bergenia one down in the corner looks really nice because it has all that extra texture from the 3D embossing folder. So that will be a really nice tactile place to put that image. Then I put in just the plain smushed one up on top, and then I'll finish off with the Sweet Pea palette washi panel over on the left side. So these are spaced just a hair differently because I did turn the sketch on its side. You still want it to be balanced, so you may have to make slight adjustments if you ever take a sketch and move it in a different direction. So for the flower, I'm going to go ahead and add in the small bloom paired with the large peony. So I really only need 1 extra leaf to give me that triangular grouping. I go for the small leaf and I arrange it the way that I think it looks best off to the side there. Again, I'm going to go ahead and add in some foam adhesive and get that attached to the card base. Sometimes you might notice that I only use 1 or 2 pieces of foam adhesive. That's just for economy of time. I typically put a lot of foam adhesive on the back of my elements to make sure that they don't get wonky or feel unsupported. For the sentiment on this, I'm going to add some foam adhesive on the right-hand side and then glue on the left-hand side because that's going to glue right on the peony. Now this time, instead of putting it towards the top, I'm going to split the bottom square there a little bit because I thought it looked really nice to have some of that green and texture peeking up over the top. Again, I'm going to add in some sequins just like I did last time, pairing a large and small sequence together and then having the medium sequence off on the side on its own. The two-way glue has really been my go-to for adding sequins to projects. It really does adhere quite well and it's super easy to control. I find that compared to other glue pens, this one really does allow the glue to come out even after you've been using the pen for a while. So there you go, 2 fabulous card designs. So what do you think? Will your next card design be full of analogous colors right next to each other on the color wheel? Or will you go across the color wheel and create some beautiful complementary color designs? Let me know and comment below. I'm so glad you spent some time with me today creating beautiful projects using sketches and fun color combinations. If you loved this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. When you create something inspired by these projects, don't forget to tag us out on social media at Altenew LLC and at Pixel Mavens Retreat. I'll be back soon with another sketch and some more card crafting tips for you. But until next time, happy crafting. Help support my craft education efforts by clicking on the subscribe button and the little bell so you'll get notified when I create new content just for you. If you're looking for something else to watch, how about one of these crafty videos?